What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Johners. This is episode 33, and we're going to be talking about a number of subjects today. As per usual, at this time of the week, we normally talk about this week's episode of NXT and NXT UK, which we'll get onto. A lot of really good stuff on this week's episode of those two shows. Can't wait to get stuck into those fairly soon. A number of topics I want to talk about. A little bit about WrestleMania, a little bit about the TakeOver New York card, and a few things we'll get into very, very shortly. Just want to throw out a little bit of a plug for myself there. As per usual, you can get in touch with the show. You can email the show, give us your feedback about the show, give us your feedback about certain episodes, things you'd like to see more of or less of on future episodes of Wrestling with Johners. Just email wrestlingwithjohners@gmail.com. You can reach out to us on Twitter. You can have a look at all the fun and games there on our Twitter profile, and it's simply @withjohners_pod. We've got an Instagram page. Go onto your Instagram and look for Wrestling with Johners. It's instagram.com/wrestling with Johners. You can't go wrong with that. I tend to update my Twitter and my Instagram page on a daily basis, multiple times per day sometimes. And then probably the group I really want to shout out about more than anything, a group I'm really looking to build. So please, interact with us on our Facebook page. Go onto Facebook, search Wrestling with Johners, and kind of ask to be part of that group. Usually lots of kind of up-to-date news, kind of opinions on things that are happening in the wrestling world, lots of kind of banter and some fun stuff. It is a fun interactive Facebook group, as you would expect, but really trying to kind of push that. I'll talk more about my social media pages and my podcast pages, where you can hear the podcast a little bit later on, besides where you're listening to it now, of course, but there are many, many ways which you can listen to the Wrestling with Johners podcast. So, hope you've all had a good week. Yes, the spring has definitely sprung, the weather's nice, the sky is blue. Don't forget to put your clocks forward, and the early hours of Sunday morning this week. You do lose an hour, unfortunately, if you're living in the UK. Always strange to us in the UK, let alone if you listen to this podcast in any other part of the world. But yes, spring forward, you do lose an hour. This coming Sunday morning. Don't forget to put your clocks forward an hour, and it's also Mother's Day in the UK this coming Sunday, so I hope you've all got your mother a nice box of chocolates or a card or something nice there. Yeah, looking at WrestleMania, so at the time of recording this, we are 1 week away from NXT TakeOver New York. That is kind of the show that a lot of people are really looking forward to, and that's the show that a lot of people kind of have penciled in as being their kind of highlights of the WrestleMania week. And of course, there's going to be many highlights. I myself, I did mention on last week's episode of Wrestling with Johners that I wasn't quite there in the excitement level with regards to WrestleMania at the moment. I'm certainly getting there. And I think week by week, my excitement level is increasing, it is improving. And I think that this last week's worth of WWE TV, SmackDown and Raw were okay, built a few more storylines, gave us a few more matches for the WrestleMania lineup. I'm not going to go into the card in any great depth here and now. I'm going to save it to next week's Wrestling with Johners, which is kind of my go home edition, where I'll be talking not just about NXT and NXT UK from next week, but also be talking a bit more in depth about the TakeOver card and the WrestleMania card and my predictions with many of those matches. But what I do want to touch on is some of the many missing names that aren't on the card so far, and many names that have kind of really taken me aback, to be honest with you, and I know it's taken many of the listeners and people that interact with online aback as well. Let's have a look at some of these missing names, and I don't know, with only another week's worth of TV time, where they've got so many kind of loose ends to storylines for matches that have already been announced to kind of play out on the go home episodes of Raw and SmackDown. I think it's too late to kind of get many of these involved in matches of their own on the WrestleMania card. And if they were kind of introduced within a match at such a late stage, they're probably only going to end up on the kickoff show. But many of these, to be honest with you, will probably just fall by the wayside on the Andre the Giant Battle Royal, which may end up on the kickoff show, certainly like last year. But the Raw Tag Team Champions, the Revival, where are they? I mean, they've lost pretty much every match they've been in since winning the titles a month or so back. They've been in a bit of a feud with Aleister Black and Ricochet on Raw, and has lost a few matches there. They're in a very good match at Fastlane, if I'm not mistaken. And that was a kind of a 3-team match for the Raw Tag Team Championships, pitting the Revival against Black and Ricochet versus Bobby Roode and Chad Gable. And that was a very good match, and they did end up winning that match, but I think a lot of their TV matches have actually ended up on the losing side. So yeah, the Revival haven't been announced yet. Now that, looking at their rivalry with Black and Ricochet on Monday Night Raw, you would half expect them to be in a match with the Revival versus Black and Ricochet on the Mania card. Now, with the WWE pushing Black and Ricochet, you would expect them to be contenders to the Revival's titles, to the Revival's championships. But no mention of a match yet. Now, Black and Ricochet, as we'll talk a bit more about later on, spoiler alert here, but are going on to face the War Raiders at NXT TakeOver New York for the WWE, for the NXT Tag Championships, of course. So, it might be stretching it a bit to expect them to be in a Raw Tag Championship match against the Revival the night after. But still, it's a possibility. It hasn't been announced yet, but I half expect the Revival, Raw Tag Team Champions, to be not defending their championships at WrestleMania and possibly being a fixture in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. Then you've got another Tag Team Champions, the SmackDown Tag Team Champions. Now, unless I've missed something, I've not noticed them. They haven't been announced for a match to defend their SmackDown Tag Team Championships yet. And now, I did see a graphic out there where they might have been facing the Hardy Boys, the Hardys. Now, I haven't seen anything official. I've scoured through the WWE website, and I can't see an official announcement for the Usos defending their championships against the Hardys. Now, in my opinion, they've probably got a better chance of having their own match to defend the SmackDown Tag Team Championships, possibly against the Hardys or whomever, than the Revival have. But nothing official about who the Usos are going to be facing. And then I've just mentioned Matt and Jeff Hardy. Jeff has been a fairly prominent player in some high profile matches. He was in the Elimination Chamber match in February for the WWE Championship. He went out fairly early on in that match, but still he's been reasonably prominent in some rivalries and some matches. And now that Matt Hardy is back on the scene, looking as fit and as good as ever, certainly in the pictures that I've seen him in, I think he's only been on TV once or twice since his official return. But no mention of them so far. And of course, Matt Hardy won the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal last year. And if you look at previous champions, I think they've only had about 4 or 5 of these Andre the Giant Battle Royals. But back in 2014, WrestleMania 30, you had Cesaro, who was the first ever champion, and that was one of the highlights of a show packed full of highlights. Certainly for the pure wrestling fans, somebody like Antonio Cesaro, as he was known back then, Cesaro nowadays, more a prominent player in the tag team ranks, teaming with Sheamus, of course, as part of the Bar. But and then the following year, let's have a think. I think it was the Big Show that won it the following year. Then Baron Corbin, then Mojo Rawley, then Matt Hardy. So some big names there. Certainly the Big Show is a big name, but obviously he's at the very tail end of his career now. But it wasn't really used as a kind of a launching pad for any of these wrestlers. In fact, when Mojo Rawley won it, you barely saw him after that. We've not seen him since. He's popped up in 1 or 2 kind of backstage moody vignettes, interviews, promos, whatever you want to call it. But the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle hasn't really done much for individuals like that. And you would have thought it would have been a good base for launching woken Matt Hardy after last year's Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, but once again it didn't really appear to be the launching pad that we were hoping from him, although he'd already had the kind of the woken gimmick since about October, November the previous year. And even after 6 months or so of portraying that gimmick on TV and then winning the Battle Royal in New Orleans last year, they still didn't do anything with him, to be honest with you. It's almost as if Vince McMahon was high on the gimmick 1 minute and then completely bored with it the next. Then look at Kevin Owens. He's just returned from surgery. I think he had surgery on one, if not both, of his knees, but made a good recovery, a quick recovery, came back a lot sooner than we was expecting. There was some really hot rumours out there that he was going to be the challenger, the number one contender, built into a storyline with Daniel Bryan for the WWE Championship at WrestleMania, and Mustafa Ali was out injured with a concussion, as we know. Kofi Kingston was kind of brought in. He did really well in that gauntlet match on SmackDown just before the Elimination Chamber to earn himself a spot in the Elimination Chamber. Was down to the final 2 with Daniel Bryan in the Elimination Chamber, the pay-per-view that took place last month in February. And that was an outstanding Elimination Chamber, one of the better ones I've seen in recent years. And that final 10 or 15 minutes with Kofi and Daniel Bryan was outstanding. Kofi we'll get on to a bit later. Because he's certainly, one of the more interesting characters and one of the more interesting storyline developments over the last, several years, to be honest with you. But the last few months has definitely been Kofi's time to shine, and the spotlight is definitely on Kofi. Kofi Mania is just around the corner, of course. But going back to Kevin Owens, he was brought back by Vince McMahon to replace Kofi Kingston in the main event against Daniel Bryan at Fastlane, which took place this month in March. And then, of course, during the match, Mustafa Ali came back to kind of complete that match as a bit of a surprise entrant to make it a third way for that WWE Championship main event at Fastlane. But we've not seen or heard much from Kevin Owens since. I think he's revived his kind of talk show gimmick on SmackDown, and I think The Miz and Shane McMahon were on that more recently. But it looks like whatever they had originally planned for Kevin Owens, whether it be for the WWE Championship against Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania, or whether it was planned all along to have him return at Fastlane, that certainly dropped off. And it looks like Kevin Owens, who was quite a prominent player, has been a prominent player in previous WrestleManias. Certainly last year he teamed up with Sami Zayn to take on Shane McMahon and Daniel Bryan in Daniel Bryan's return match, which was it was an okay match considering it was Daniel Bryan's first match back and it had Shane McMahon in it. I think Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn did as well as could be expected under the circumstances. And we haven't really seen much from Sami Zayn since then. He's been out with an injury, of course. But where does that leave Kevin Owens? Kevin Owens, Andre the Giant Battle Royal, bound for him as well by the looks of it. Then you've got Mustafa Ali, or as he needs to be referred to now, as just Ali. I can't understand why, for the love of God, he's had his first name removed. I know that it seems to be par for the course now whenever you get brought up into the main roster. It happened with Cesaro. It happened with Big E. It's happened to Rusev and so many others. I could kind of write a list as long as your arm, but as far as people that have had their name changed, God knows what they're going to do with, the Aleister Blacks of this world, and will it just be Aleister going forward and things like that. But yes, Ali, Mustafa Ali, I'm going to continue calling him Mustafa Ali. There's nothing wrong with the name at all. I think he's definitely a fantastic role model for all kind of young aspiring wrestlers, and he sets out a really good influence, and like I say, he's a great role model to Muslims, to people of his faith. And so often, and we've seen it so many times in the past, where people of Mustafa Ali's faith have always been portrayed as the bad guy, and more of a kind of a terrorist Muslim sort of gimmick, and I hate to go down that road because I think it's just awful from the beginning. The things that WWE have done to gimmicks like that in the past, which really hasn't done the individual or the company any favours when they've done that. But now they've got a positive role model in Mustafa Ali, and they're getting rid of his first name, which I can't make any sense of. But then, going back to Mustafa Ali, you look at the beginning of the year, he was being pushed in a main event feud with Daniel Bryan. He was getting over in matches against Daniel Bryan, in matches involving Randy Orton, Daniel Bryan, and himself, of course, and actually pinning the champion, Daniel Bryan, on a couple of occasions, which we thought was leading him up to a decent feud heading into Elimination Chamber. We know what happened there when he suffered his concussion and was out for a number of weeks, and we honestly thought that from Elimination Chamber he was going to be the number one contender heading into WrestleMania. And obviously he got sidelined with his concussion. He came back to be part of the main event at Fastlane, which was possibly done as a little bit of a thank you for his main event push being his championship push being taken away from him, but then it was kind of brought back for some strange reason. But then that was obviously something to kind of appease Daniel Bryan and maybe Mustafa Ali at the time, but they haven't done anything with Ali since, and it looks like he could be another wrestler that could be just relegated to the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. Now I say relegated because if it has got these names in it, it's going to be you would think that it would have a fairly star-studded lineup, considering many of the names that I've mentioned and some of the names that I will be bringing up very soon. But there's a chance that it could be on the main card, because you've only got to look at the involvement of the Saturday Night Live individuals, Colin Jost and Michael Che, who have got this kind of like mini feud going with Braun Strowman. That's played out the last couple of weeks of Monday Night Raw. So with their involvement, it probably gives it a little bit of a boost and a little bit more of a chance of it being on the main card. And then of course you've got Braun Strowman. Now, what happened to his big push? Now, a couple of years back, he was in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. That was his first proper WrestleMania. You could say that he was, part of the lineup of WrestleMania 32, and in fact, he was kind of part of the Wyatt family back then when The Rock got involved and had that world's quickest WrestleMania match with Eric Rowan, and Braun Strowman was there as the kind of the big guy as part of the Wyatt family with the black sheep mask, you may remember. And then WrestleMania 33 was in the Battle Royal. WrestleMania 34, where he was red hot and really deserved something better than what he got, but he was in the tag title match for the Raw Tag Team Championships up against the Bar, and of course he chooses that 10-year-old kid out of the crowd to be his tag team partner. So essentially he beat the Bar by himself to win the tag team titles, but that was an embarrassing moment. And again, it looks like he's going to be relegated to the Andre the Giant Battle Royal this year. So for somebody so hot, not too long ago, his star power has really diminished over the last, let's say, year or so, where he's been a face, a heel, a baby face again, back to heel, back to baby face. He won the greatest Royal Rumble in Saudi Arabia early part of last year. I think that was around about May time. But they've done nothing really to capitalise on Braun Strowman. Yes, he's been in some championship matches. He's been number one contender a few times against Brock Lesnar. He's suffered the odd injury in the last 6 to 8 months as well, which has kind of put him back a little bit. But they've completely mishandled Braun Strowman's push. Should be doing a lot more with him nowadays. A lot of people would have thought that he would have been kind of contending for the Universal Championship at this year's WrestleMania. Now, I don't know if he's done something to upset somebody behind the scenes, but they've really messed up his push, and we're going to be expected to kind of no doubt believe in him in the future when Vince McMahon certainly starts to believe in Braun Strowman again. Never really should have stopped believing in him, I think, with his size, his strength, his look, his demeanour. I think he could have and should have gone a lot further with the company than he has done. Yes, he's had his opportunities. He has had his opportunities, and some of the opportunities you could say he squandered. But he should have been world champion at least once before now. But he's going to be in the battle royal. Then you got Shinsuke Nakamura, Rusev. Now, I put out a post on my Twitter page the other day with a picture of Shinsuke Nakamura and Rusev, saying 12 months ago they were two of the most over acts in all the company, heading into WrestleMania in championship matches with Nakamura, of course, the number one contender to the AJ Styles WWE Championship. And Rusev was going to be part of the United States Championship match involving Randy Orton, Jinder Mahal and Bobby Roode, and of course Rusev in a four-way, and both individuals ended up losing. But I mean, I'm even more annoyed for Rusev, because Rusev Day was so popular. I was out there in New Orleans, every night on Bourbon Street. It was Rusev Day, Rusev Day, Rusev Day. Wherever you went, it was Rusev Day. Even in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome, it was Rusev Day, Rusev Day. And the crowd really wanted Rusev to win that championship. It would have been, just deserved for Rusev and for the fans, and how he got himself over with this Rusev Day gimmick. And since then, once again, we've not really seen anything from Rusev. We haven't seen anything from Aiden English. He's part of the commentary team on 205 Live now. So, that gimmick was red hot with those two. I don't care what anybody says. And then Lana gets involved again. It all drops off a cliff. But yeah, Shinsuke Nakamura, one of the brightest, best acquisitions that the WWE have made in the last 3 or 4 years, and did so well in NXT, came up with so much promise. The thing is, yes, he's not American. English is not his first language, but he, is an amazing talent with an exceptional gimmick and fantastic charisma. But he has been given opportunities similar to Braun Strowman, you could say. And maybe, he hasn't delivered in the ring as much as everybody was expecting. But I know that even the most talented of wrestlers, when they come to WWE, the wings are clipped a little bit, and they're not allowed to do certain things that they were allowed to do on the independents, or, with New Japan, or wherever they might have been before. So I can kind of understand that, and a lot of people saying that Shinsuke Nakamura is just phoning it in and doing it for the money. I don't fully believe that, to be honest with you. I just think that he's been mishandled to the point where he's not been given a real opportunity. And even when he was the United States champion not too long ago on the SmackDown brand, they did nothing with him, which was a real shame. And I do believe that as a character, as a gimmick, he has delivered. He can deliver. I think that he was given a new lease of life when he was turned into heel Nakamura, which I think was fantastic for him. But nothing much since. So really disappointed for Nakamura and Rusev. And once again, although they're a tag team at the moment, definitely not a match at WrestleMania for these two, and they're more than likely going to end up on the Battle Royal as well. Then there's Asuka. So you could say that the writing was on the wall, that we should have saw this a mile off. She won the main event of TLC, and it was a triple threat TLC match involving herself, Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch for the SmackDown Women's Championship. I think thanks to some outside interference from Ronda Rousey, Asuka managed to win the SmackDown Women's Championship. And it was an excellent match, and we thought, yes, this is it. She's back in prominence. She, lost her championship match to Charlotte at WrestleMania 34 last year after being this undefeated monster for so many, for 2 years, maybe more. I know that she was the undefeated NXT champion when she went out injured, came onto the main roster, was still undefeated up until WrestleMania last year. Then she got involved in this ridiculous feud with Carmella and James Ellsworth, which really, put her reputation in the toilet, to be honest with you. And then they built her up slowly but surely, gradually, leading to this TLC championship win in December, which we thought was going to be her opportunity to start delivering again as a killer. She, stayed relatively hot through that period, and of course she beat Becky Lynch in the opening match of the Royal Rumble. Becky Lynch, the white hot WWE superstar at the moment, and Asuka managed to have her day in the sunshine against Becky Lynch on that occasion. Everybody thought, yeah, fantastic. Asuka's definitely going to be pushed even more from here. Definitely going to have a WrestleMania match. But then we were waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting a bit more. And she was off telly for so many weeks. She was involved in a match against Mandy Rose at Fastlane, which was an absolute farce, especially with the way the match ended. I'm not even going to touch on that again. You can listen to my Fastlane review if you want to kind of hear how that match ended up. But it wasn't... Asuka won, don't get me wrong. But, with the whole ring skirt ending, yes. So, yeah, and then we thought, well, all these matches are being announced for WrestleMania. When is Asuka going to get her opponent for WrestleMania? And it never comes. And then we kind of hear there's going to be this 4-way number one contenders match on SmackDown this week to see who would face Asuka for her championship at WrestleMania. Asuka gets announced, and then Charlotte Flair comes down, kind of hijacks proceedings. They have this really fantastic match on SmackDown this week. And, Charlotte Flair obviously won the SmackDown Women's Championship. So, added into the mix for the main event at WrestleMania, you got Becky Lynch and Ronda Rousey and Charlotte Flair, with Ronda as the Raw Women's Champion, Charlotte Flair now as the SmackDown Women's Champion, so kind of adding a lot more importance into the match regarding, two belts being on the line. The winner will take all. Could both titles be unified? Now that's another story for another podcast. Maybe I'll talk more about that next week. But then Asuka, seemingly goes from, this champion, SmackDown Women's Champion. What's happening with her at WrestleMania? Right, we know that one of these four women is gonna face her at WrestleMania, and then it all comes to nothing. It comes to Charlotte winning the championship, and Asuka is seemingly relegated to, a women's battle royal. Now, there's been no mention of a women's battle royal yet. I'm sure that will be something that they'll throw together on next week's SmackDown or Raw and have as part of the pre-show on WrestleMania. Now, last year's women's battle royal at WrestleMania, part of the pre-show, was actually fairly good. Had a bit of high drama towards the end there with Bayley and Sasha Banks, and then Naomi eventually winning the battle royal. And it looks like that's possibly where any woman that's not part of the tag championship match or the main event match will probably end up, to be fair, the women's battle royal. Now, as I said, no mention of the women's battle royal yet, so hopefully there is going to, and I'm sure there will be, because they like to get everybody on to WrestleMania one way or another. They like to give everybody a payday. There's, what about Aleister Black and Ricochet? I mean, they're obviously going to be a prominent part of NXT TakeOver New York. They have been involved in this feud of sorts with the Revival. I can see Aleister Black and Ricochet eventually becoming Raw Tag Team champions. They may end up on the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal this time round, if at all, because remember they're going to be in a featured match on TakeOver the night before. But the Revival won't be on the card. But I can see possibly Black and Ricochet having a match with the Revival, maybe the night after WrestleMania, the Monday Night Raw after WrestleMania, which is where the championships will change hands. They've been prominent players on the main roster since their promotion to Raw and SmackDown a month or so ago. But we shall see if they play any part in WrestleMania, but at the moment their names haven't been mentioned at all. There are some prominent names that haven't been mentioned that aren't going to be part of this WrestleMania, or certainly unless they make a surprise cameo appearance on the night, but nothing from The Undertaker. Nothing from John Cena. Now, those two fought each other at last year's WrestleMania. John Cena is kind of busy in Hollywood nowadays, and The Undertaker seems to be busy at Starcasts and various conventions and spoken word tours. But I don't think it's a bad thing, to be honest with you, to have no John Cena and no Undertaker this year. And it does mean, if you look at the bigger picture, there are less part-timers on this year's WrestleMania compared to previous year's WrestleManias. And yes, you can look at the Batistas, who's going to be going up against Triple H, and both of them two are part-timers, with Batista definitely being considered a part-timer. This is going to be his first match since WrestleMania 30. Beth Phoenix, definitely a part-timer. She's not been part of a WrestleMania for many years, but I think she's actually a good addition to that women's tag title match. Brock Lesnar can certainly be considered a part-timer because he only appears a handful of times throughout the year, but he's always kind of a key feature, a key part of any show that he's a part of. And remember, because I momentarily forgot for a second there, that Brock Lesnar is still the Universal Champion, and he's going to be going up against Seth Rollins, who's been kind of carrying the load in the build to their match at WrestleMania. And then, of course, you got probably the biggest and maybe worst of all the part-timers on the WrestleMania card in a featured match, Shane McMahon versus The Miz. Now, Shane McMahon, he's got his haters, he's got his detractors, he's got his fans as well, but you look at all the names that I mentioned previously who are not on the card, the Kevin Owens, the Mustafa Ali's, the Braun Strowmans, the Nakamura's and the Rusevs, and I can go on and on and on of people that would probably end up in the Battle Royal as opposed to being in a featured match. You look at some of the younger talent, and Shane McMahon, a lot of people would say, doesn't deserve to be in a featured match. Yes, he has to get his WrestleMania moment. He has to kind of jump off of all the kind of high things in the building. No doubt he will, in an attempt to kill himself. Yeah, he's in a featured match with The Miz, and I suppose the only kind of positive that I can kind of give you regarding McMahon versus The Miz this year is that the build has been fairly good, and it's been refreshing to have Shane McMahon as the heel, and a fairly good heel nonetheless. But it doesn't take away from the fact that he is potentially taken a spot away from a younger, more talented wrestler on the roster who's not going to get his or her opportunity this year. Next week we'll be taking a deeper look at the NXT TakeOver card and the WrestleMania cards, including my thoughts on what matches will take place on the pre-show, because the matches that have been announced, I think there's been about 12 or 13 matches announced so far, with another couple expected to be announced. And all of them, fairly good matches involving some high-profile players, and you might get a few surprises as far as which matches ends up on the pre-show, as opposed to being on the main card. So there could be some surprises there. Now, one thing I do want to mention, and this is something I was reminded of this morning, was that WrestleMania 35, this coming WrestleMania, it's the first WrestleMania since WrestleMania 27. So how many years ago is that? That's about 8 years ago, where we've had a main event involving full-time performers. So of course the main event, it's been confirmed this week, is Ronda Rousey versus Charlotte Flair versus Becky Lynch for the Raw Women's Championship, and yes, it involves full-timers, and it's the first time since WrestleMania 27. So if you have a look at WrestleMania 27, of course you had The Miz defending the WWE Championship against John Cena. Both were considered full-timers at the time, but then from there you had WrestleMania 28, you had The Rock versus Cena. So The Rock, of course, coming back for his first match in a long time. I think it would be his first WrestleMania match since WrestleMania 2004, if I'm not mistaken. Rock definitely the part-timer there. The following year, it was the rematch from the one-time only Rock versus Cena match, WrestleMania 28. You had the second time only Rock versus Cena at WrestleMania 29. WrestleMania 30, you had Daniel Bryan in the main event against Randy Orton, and part-timer at the time Batista came back for the Royal Rumble, won the Royal Rumble rather controversially, and ended up in the main event. So he was definitely the part-timer there. WrestleMania 32, Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns, with Brock Lesnar certainly being considered the part-timer, considering he only wrestles 4 or 5 times a year. WrestleMania 32 in Dallas, Triple H coming back as the part-timer against Roman Reigns. 33, Undertaker, the part-timer against Roman Reigns again. And then last year, Brock Lesnar, the part-timer against Roman Reigns in the main event of WrestleMania 34 in New Orleans there. So it's interesting to note that, yes, the first time since WrestleMania 27. This will be the first time where you've got nothing but full-time performers in the main event at a WrestleMania. So, before we get on to our NXT and NXT review, just wanted to touch on something that's fairly newsworthy, and that is that at this year's WWE Access, WrestleMania Access, you've got the return of the Worlds Collide show. So I don't think it's a tournament the same as they had during Royal Rumble Access this past January, but I just want to kind of go through some of the matches that have been announced for Access from Thursday the 4th of April all the way through to Monday the 8th of April, and of course they've extended Access. Instead of it culminating on the Sunday this year, they're giving us one more day of Access on the Monday. With some of these names actually, they will end up on the WWE Network. I know that they're going to be airing Worlds Collide again, but on the Thursday the 4th, they've got NXT versus NXT alumni. So you've got matches involving Roderick Strong versus Tyler Breeze, Dominic Dijakovic versus Luke Harper, Sanity versus Undisputed Era, and Cassius Ohno versus Aiden English. So it's obviously current NXT superstars versus alumni NXT superstars that have made it up onto the main roster. On the Friday, you've got Cruiserweights Collide. So you've got Tyler Bate versus the Brian Kendrick, which I think will be an amazing match. Can't wait to see that if it does air. Akira Tozawa versus Jordan Devlin, another mouth-watering match there between those two. Flash Morgan Webster and Mark Andrews versus R.A. Daivari and Mike Kanellis. Albert Hardy Jr. versus Gran Metalik versus Ligero. That should be a fantastic lightweight or cruiserweight match. Going on to the Saturday, you've got NXT UK TV tapings, as I alluded to in my Facebook post last night. So that will be, I think, 2 or 3 weeks worth of tapings done there. On the Sunday, you got Brand Battle, so it's described as a 20 Superstar Battle Royal. Sorry, 2 20 Superstar Battle Royals, one for the male superstars and one for the female superstars, that will take place the morning of WrestleMania. Both Battle Royals will feature superstars from NXT and NXT UK, and the men's Battle Royal will additionally feature superstars from 205 Live. Then moving on to the Monday, and they're calling it Women Collide on Monday the 8th of April. So one day after the female superstars main event WrestleMania for the first time, it's the women of the WWE Universe that will be highlighting this Access the day after WrestleMania, with female superstars from NXT, NXT UK, Raw, SmackDown Live, matches including Io Shirai versus Sonya Deville, which sounds outstanding. I'm sure it's going to be a fabulous match. Io could be the new NXT Women's Champion for that match. Toni Storm versus Nikki Cross, which I'm sure will be, in fact, Toni Storm versus Nikki Cross versus Bianca Belair. So that, adding Bianca Belair in there certainly makes it even more of an appealing match. Then you get Viper, or Piper Niven, versus Zelina Vega, which would be a good match to watch if you're there in person, and Candice LeRae versus Kaylee Ray to kind of finish off that round of matches on Monday the 8th at WrestleMania Access, and the Monday is going to be called Women Collide. So all of it is kind of part of this. I'm guessing they're theming the matches at Access Worlds Collide. It doesn't sound like it's going to be a tournament like it was at Royal Rumble Access, but nonetheless it sounds like it's going to be fun. Lots of top talent there from NXT UK, NXT, including the main roster and including some talent from 205 Live, and some of it is going to air as a special feature on the WWE Network, following WrestleMania, I would imagine a week or so later. One thing I just want to kind of touch on before I go into this week's review of NXT UK, just want to encourage you to go out and check one of 2 episodes that I put out last week, episode 32, and it's my exclusive interview with Gary Ward. Now, he's the owner and the promoter of WrestleGate Pro, based in Nottingham, and their promotion that only kind of was established back end of last year, 2018, and had their first show in January this year, the second show earlier on this month. They do already have ties with WXW and other wrestling organisations, indie promotions around the UK, and they have highlighted quite a few of some of the bigger indie names across UK and Europe on their first two shows, including Chris Ridgway, Ilya Dragunov, Martina Session Moth, and many others. And I know that they are building towards their third show in May, which will take place on May the 18th, and it's going to be called WrestleGate Pro Presents Lion's Spirit. So that sounds like an awesome show. We are hoping to go down to the Rushcliffe Arena in Nottingham to cover that show for Wrestling with Johners. So stay tuned for that. But WrestleGate Pro, certainly one of the better up-and-coming UK indie promotions. And check out episode 32 of Wrestling with Johners and my exclusive interview with WrestleGate Pro's owner and promoter, Gary Ward, on that episode. You can find that on pretty much any podcast platform that's out there, including YouTube, if you want to check out the video of that interview. Right, on to NXT UK and my review of the 27th of March edition, this past Wednesday's episode of NXT UK. And it opens with the first match, Jordan Devlin versus Dan Maloney. So Dan Maloney looked great as he made his entrance for his match tonight, and he got a really good reception from the fans in the Coventry Sky Dome. But let's face it, he is up against Jordan Devlin, who has been one of the more impressive and dominant wrestlers on NXT UK, and pretty much anywhere where he decides to ply his trade nowadays. Maloney chops Devlin in the corner to start the match, taking a little bit of control there, but Devlin hits an enziguri followed by his patented standing moonsault for an early 2 count. Devlin has recently been crowned the OTT World Champion over in Ireland for the second time in the last 12 months, beating Walter in a fantastic main event on their latest show. Dan Maloney catches Devlin with a solid knee lift, a devastating clothesline followed by a huge backdrop, sending Devlin to the outside of the ring. Devlin hits a springboard cutter from the edge of the ring to the inside, getting a 2 count from that move. Devlin wallops Maloney with a stiff headbutt, leading to the finish, where Jordan Devlin finishes the match with his awesome ripcord backdrop driver, which Jordan Devlin calls the Devlin driver, and I know that because he told me in person what it was called when I asked him a few weeks ago at Progress. Another impressive win there for Jordan Devlin, and that will hopefully lead to even more opportunities for the Irish Ace in the not too distant future. I'm so glad that the WWE are getting even more behind Devlin, as he is without a doubt one of the most improved workers of the last couple of years. Across indie wrestling in general. Personally, I wouldn't be against introducing a secondary title in NXT UK. Some might think that's a little bit too soon, but for this ever-growing roster on the NXT UK brand to fight for, and for talented individuals such as Devlin or maybe Tyler Bate, Ligero for example, to fight for when the UK champion is off our screens for any length of time. It probably will happen. Then we get Cassius Ohno, who comes out to address the fans in attendance at the Coventry Sky Dome. Cassius starts by saying that he'd been told to make an apology for his actions against Ashton Smith on last week's NXT UK. Cassius said that he truthfully and sincerely apologises to Ashton Smith. It was wrong for him to do what he did. He shouldn't have revived him only to knock him down again, and it's something that he really shouldn't have done. But he just couldn't help himself. He said that you don't know how gratifying it is to just take away someone's consciousness over and over again, and that's why he came here to NXT UK. Cassius said that it's 2019 and he could have gone anywhere he wanted, but he decided to come to NXT UK because NXT UK chose him. They told him to go out and to make a statement, and that's exactly what he did. He then referred to Travis Banks as the kid trying to play the hero, mimicking a British wrestler and masquerading as an American wrestler. Cassius went on to say that he didn't travel halfway across the world to involve himself with Travis Banks. Cassius ended by saying that if Travis Banks ever found himself across the ring from Cassius Ohno, then that little buzzsaw would find himself busted and broken to bits. Tough words there from Cassius Ohno, and I've enjoyed Cassius on NXT UK so far, demonstrating his excellent promo ability as well as his solid in-ring style. So what do you think of Cassius Ohno being part of NXT UK, and how do you think he's gotten so far? Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of Travis Banks. I've seen him wrestle a number of occasions live, and he's always great to watch live, but he isn't the strongest on the mic, which is why it makes sense to have him feud with Ohno here, who could carry the responsibilities on the mic in the build-up to their eventual matchup. Don't get me wrong, I like Travis Banks, the wrestler, not too keen on Travis Banks, the gimmick. I don't quite get it. Myself and David Anderson spoke last week about Jinny and Toni Storm, and when and where they should meet in a championship match for the NXT UK Women's Championship. Well, the answer was presented to us on this week's edition of NXT UK, as Toni Storm and Jinny will face each other in 2 weeks' time on NXT UK for the Women's Championship. That will be the post-WrestleMania edition of NXT UK, I'm guessing, and will be the highlight of that week's Wrestling with Johners as well. With that, we see Jinny representing the WWE and NXT UK in India. Jinny says that these people need a hero, NXT UK need a hero, and a sweetheart, referring to Toni Storm, you are no one's hero. That was a really great segment involving Jinny, and I for one can't wait to see their match in only 2 weeks' time. Then we get a match between Xia Brookside and Rhea Ripley. So we've seen these two face off before. The most memorable of those two occasions, or most memorable of their matches, was in the tournament to crown the first NXT UK Women's Champion. So Xia impresses me more and more every time I see her. I know that she is a massive favourite of David Anderson. We spoke about Xia Brookside last week, and how far she has surpassed her father's name, creating a name for herself on the indie circuit, on NXT UK, of course. However, tonight she goes up against former NXT UK Women's Champion Rhea Ripley. And as always, Rhea looks awesome as she makes her entrance and enters the ring. Ripley uses her power to slow the match down for the first few minutes, until Xia attempts a head scissors, only to be slammed down to the canvas. Ripley executes an excellent standing vertical suplex to get a 2 count from that move. Ripley was showing true heel tendencies in this match, talking back to not just Xia, but back to the fans and back to the referee. Ripley goes for another vertical suplex, only for Xia to reverse it into a small package for a 2 count. Brookside makes a brief comeback for a couple of standing drop kicks, only to be caught in midair on the second attempt, but Ripley was unable to slap on her patented inverted cloverleaf on this occasion. Brookside makes another comeback with a bulldog, followed by an excellent head scissors takedown. Ripley gets nailed with a double knees to the back, but Xia couldn't capitalise any further as Ripley stuns her smaller opponent with a wicked slap to the face. But as Ripley goes for a top rope superplex, Xia slides underneath her opponent's legs, pushes Ripley's feet from underneath her on the top turnbuckle before Ripley falls into the Tree of Woe, allowing Xia to hit a basement drop kick to the face of Rhea Ripley, who is hanging upside down in the corner. Ripley rolls to the outside, but Brookside follows up brilliantly with a fantastic dive from the top turnbuckle onto her opponent on the outside. Xia follows this up with a pair of double knees, getting a 2 count for her troubles. The end of the match was not too far behind as Ripley powers up Xia, throwing her into the turnbuckles before executing her a riptide pump handle slam for the 3 counts in 7 minutes. Rhea Ripley then grabs the microphone to ask if the women's division hasn't learnt yet. If anyone steps into the ring with her, they get ripped apart. Xia Brookside wants to talk tough, but Rhea says that she has just shown what a true nightmare is. Ripley sends out a warning to every other woman in the NXT UK division, calling herself the dominant woman in NXT UK. Just then, we hear some unfamiliar music, and out steps the newest signee to the NXT UK roster, Viper. Viper reprising her Mae Young classic name here as Piper Niven, to the loud approval of everyone in attendance, and from me as well. Loud Viper. Viper's gonna kill you chants from the fans as she chases Ripley out of the ring before grabbing the mic to say, the most dominant woman in NXT UK, not anymore. So another established name on the indie circuit is finally part of the WWE and NXT UK roster, with Viper potentially setting up a feud there with Rhea Ripley, which I for one would not be against at all. Then we see Kaylee Ray backstage next to Isla Dawn, with Kaylee Ray saying that she's not here to make friends, she's here to take out the competition, and who knows, you might be next, as she sends out a clear message to Isla Dawn. That was a fun segment backstage between Isla Dawn and Kaylee Ray, cementing the fact that the women's roster on NXT UK is probably the best overall women's roster on any of the WWE brands, in my opinion. You only need to look at its champion Toni Storm, and then you have Ginny as the new number one contender. We have the dominant Rhea Ripley, Piper Niven, Kaylee Ray, Isla Dawn, Millie McKenzie, Xia Brookside, Nina Samuels, as well as Jazzy Gabbett, and so many others that I've failed to mention. That's 10 names, 10 wrestlers on the women's roster on NXT UK. Such an outstanding roster. They could start a weekly show based on the women's roster on NXT UK alone. Outstanding talent, and it's just a start, in my opinion. I think that the NXT UK roster is going to be a prominent part on NXT UK programming, or at least it certainly deserves to. Then we see a fantastic video package featuring the ring general, Walter. There's footage of Walter in WXW, Progress, as well as interviews with various wrestlers and backstage staff. There's footage of him putting the chops and kicks into Ilya Dragunov, Dave Mastiff, and that almighty chop on his NXT UK debut against Jack Stars, which left a picture-perfect imprint of Walter's hand on Stars' chest. It makes me wince every time I see it. Then we get a backstage interview with Trent Seven, where he refers to Joe Coffey's comments calling Trent dead weight. Trent says that we have seen him as part of British Strong Style with Pete and Tyler. We've seen him as part of Moustache Mountain with Tyler Bate. But now it's time for him to stand in the middle of the ring with the Trent Seven army behind him, waiting for Joe Coffey. We see Fabian Eichner and Marcel Bartel checking out the training montage of Amir Jordan and Kenny Williams from last week's episode. Eichner says that they are here for one reason, and they are here to change NXT UK, the NXT UK universe. Eichner says that to them this means much, much more than to any other team in NXT UK, because to them the mat is sacred. It looks like Eichner and Bartel are getting serious and have Williams and Amir Jordan in their sights. Then we move on to the final match of this week's NXT UK, Mark Andrews versus Noam Dar. So Dar takes the offense straight to Mark Andrews with a basement drop kick, sending Andrews to the outside. Back in the ring, Dar drops Andrews across the top rope. Andrews makes a comeback with a dive through the ropes onto Dar on the outside before getting a 2 count from a standing corkscrew moonsault in the centre of the ring. So some really quick action here to start the match. Andrews connects with a moonsault from the ring apron before being kicked to the outside himself, where Dar throws Andrews into the ring steps, appearing to injure Mark Andrews' left ankle in the process. Dar manages to slap on a knee bar, adding insult to injury, which Andrews was able to escape from by grabbing hold of the bottom rope. Andrews is unable to climb to the top rope due to his injury to his left ankle, but instead pulls off an Arabian press moonsault onto Dar for a 2 count of his own. This match is definitely back and forth, and the fans have really appeared to be getting into the action, and there's some rather amusing chants from the crowd until Andrews tries a reverse Rana onto Dar, but Dar's left leg appears to twist awkwardly during the execution of that move. The referee throws up the dreaded X symbol and calls for the end of this match, with Noam Dar and Mark Andrews down, both injured. Both men get carried out on stretchers, and at the end of the match, with Dar appearing to be the worst of the two. Dar's injury certainly appeared to be legit from what I could tell at the time. However, this could be an angle to further the storyline between these two. I don't know any more than what I've witnessed on this edition of NXT UK. I'm hoping that we see both men back in the ring very soon. Fingers crossed that it's nothing too serious if it is a legit injury. As Mark Andrews and Noam Dar get carried out, they both raise their thumbs to the fans, indicating hopefully a positive sign, and hopefully we'll see them back in the ring very soon. We then see graphics showing 2 featured matches on next week's NXT UK, which will be Isla Dawn versus Kaylee Ray, their little backstage confrontation or conversation, however you want to word it, that happened earlier on in this episode, leading to a match which will be on next week's NXT UK, as well as Trent Seven versus Joe Coffey. That will be another excellent match, or another excellent week of action from what I believe is the hottest up-and-coming brand, certainly in WWE at the moment. With the possible exception of the main NXT show. Then we move on to the contract signing between Pete Dunne and Walter, which is a contract signing for the WWE United Kingdom Championship match that will take place at NXT TakeOver New York next Friday. So Sid Scala introduces Walter and Pete Dunne. Walter is such an imposing figure as he stands in the ring waiting for the champion to make his entrance, but Dunne doesn't look intimidated as he walks slowly to the ring with his championship firmly placed over his shoulder. Walter quietly and calmly signs the contract before passing it to Pete Dunne. Dunne picks up the mic and tells Walter that he doesn't need to say anything. Dunne says that it's not just the WWE Universe that want this match. Pete Dunne says that he wants this match. Dunne says that at TakeOver New York, Walter will find out what everybody knows, that for the last 674 days he is the Bruiserweight and the United Kingdom NXT UK belongs to him. There's loud Bruiserweight chants as Pete Dunne continues by saying that the WWE UK Championship is and always will be his. Dunne signs the contract before Walter picks up the mic to address Pete Dunne by saying something in Austrian, before saying in English to Pete Dunne that he shouldn't look at him like that, and that he could reach over and put him through the table, but he don't need to do that to prove his point. And in New York City, the reign of the Bruiserweight will end and this title will be his. Dunne raises the championship high above his head as the show goes off the air, and wow, that was intense and an excellent way to build towards this already exciting championship match that will take place in just 1 week's time at TakeOver New York. As per normal, this was another really fun episode of NXT UK. Enjoyed everything from the Jordan Devlin match against Dan Maloney, and great to see the Irish Ace looking more and more dominant in the ring week after week. Definitely a force to be reckoned with any wrestling promotion that he chooses to wrestle with. And as I mentioned, we've recently seen him in Progress, and taking the OTT title off of Walter a couple of weekends ago in Ireland. So he is literally setting the world ablaze with his wrestling style in the ring. I enjoyed Rhea Ripley versus Xia Brookside, with Brookside getting more offence in compared to her previous matches against Ripley, and I loved the first ever NXT UK appearance from Piper Niven. Mark Andrews versus Noam Dar match was better than I was expecting going into it, with a slightly concerning ending to the match. Angle or not, that was something you don't see every day on WWE TV. It was, if it was a real injury, then I hope that both wrestlers get well soon and make it back into the wrestling ring soon. I know that Noam Dar has been plagued by injuries over the last few years, and it would be a shame to see him out with another injury so soon after becoming a fixture of sorts in NXT UK. And I really enjoyed the contract signing with Walter and Pete Dunne. Both men didn't have too much to say, but what they did say was effective and made me even more excited for their match at TakeOver New York on the 5th of April. Moving on to NXT from Full Sail from this past Wednesday's show. The opening of the show reminds us that we have the final of the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic tonight, pitting the Forgotten Sons versus Ricochet and Aleister Black. Not the match we expected to see in the final at the beginning of this tournament when we first saw the brackets, but it should be a fine match nonetheless. The first person we see that comes out in this episode of NXT is Adam Cole. He comes out to the ring with the newly vacated NXT Championship belt sitting on a small table in the centre of the ring. Cole says that last week he defeated 4 of the best NXT superstars to face Johnny Gargano at TakeOver New York. Cole said that first and foremost he wants Gargano to come out to face him like a man to find out exactly what he's in for come TakeOver New York. Johnny Gargano comes out to the ring and there's dueling chants for both wrestlers before Gargano said that he loves the Johnny wrestling chants. Johnny tells Cole that he is in the fight of his life at TakeOver New York. Johnny says that now that Tommaso is out, his path to the NXT Championship goes through Adam Cole and he'll find out why they call him Johnny Takeover Baby. Cole then tells Gargano that he hasn't exactly been in the winner's circle when it comes to takeovers in the past. Cole tells Gargano that the more appropriate nickname should be Johnny Participation. Johnny Participation cannot beat Adam Cole in a 2 out of 3 falls match at TakeOver, said Cole. Adam says how fitting it would be for him to reach the pinnacle of his NXT career by beating the NXT champion, by being the NXT champion at the Barclays Center, which is where it all started for him 2 years ago. Johnny said that he had to fight just to be in NXT to start with until he was thrown into a makeshift tag team with Tommaso Ciampa in the first ever Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. Gargano then said that he's earned everything that's been afforded to him because this place is his life. He has earned his place on NXT and he wouldn't change a thing about the previous 4 years, and where he is going is TakeOver New York, and Johnny Wrestling will finally become NXT champion. Cole finishes by saying that Gargano can fight, scratch and claw all he wants, but at the end of TakeOver New York, Adam Cole will be the NXT champion, and here's why. Just then, the other members of the Undisputed Era, so Kyle O'Reilly, Bobby Fish and Roderick Strong, come out onto the rampway. Cole tells Gargano that their match will be undisputed. That was a great segment to kick off this week's NXT, and a great highly charged promo between these two to hype up their match at NXT TakeOver New York, of course. Then we see a tag match between Lacey Lane and Casey Catanzaro versus Vanessa Bourne and Aaliyah. So Lacey Lane displayed some excellent agility as she bounces from rope to rope before arm dragging Bourne to the outside. The match is barely 2 minutes old when Shayna Baszler and company come down to the ring to pummel Lacey Lane out of the ring. Baszler tried to put the Karafuda clutch onto Casey Catanzaro, but Casey is able to escape from the hold before drop-kicking Shafir and Duke off the ring apron. Baszler soon slaps on the hold in the second attempt onto the much smaller Catanzaro, sending out a clear message to the rest of the NXT women's locker room, including her 3 opponents at TakeOver New York in 1 week's time. Then we get a match between Matt Riddle and Kona Reeves. So, it was announced this week that Matt Riddle, the original Bro, will be taking on the Velveteen Dream for the North American Championship at TakeOver New York on the 5th of April. But tonight he's taking on Kona Reeves, someone who we've not seen in an NXT ring for a number of weeks. Riddle squashes Reeves with a massive Broton, followed by a gut-wrench suplex. Then, without warning, Velveteen Dream is pushed out onto the stage, onto a chaise lounge, a sofa of some description, to distract Riddle, allowing Reeves to hit the original Bro with the back suplex before hooking in the Kona clutch as Dream looks on. Matt Riddle blocks a couple of strikes from Reeves to nail a couple of palm strikes of his own before connecting with a ripcord knee. Matt Riddle slaps on the Bro mission for the submission win after only 5 minutes. The Velveteen Dream announces Riddle as the victor, and when Riddle approaches Dream, he grabs the mic from Velveteen Dream's hand and tells him that he will see him in New York, bro. Then we get the final of the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic Tag Tournament for 2019, pitting the Forgotten Sons versus Ricochet and Aleister Black. So looking at the 8 teams in the first round draw, nobody was expecting the Forgotten Sons to have advanced to the final. They managed to beat their first round opponents, Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch, then to go on to their semi-final to face Mustache Mountain in the semi-finals, who they was able to beat, of course, to then face Ricochet and Aleister Black in the final. which is where we are tonight. Nevertheless, this tournament has been a smart booking to get the Forgotten Sons a few wins under their belt and to make them more of a credible team in the process. They're still not popular by any stretch of the imagination, but they have put in a good display for themselves. The fans are fully behind the team of Ricochet and Aleister Black as the ring bell sounds to get the match started. The match is only 2 minutes old before Ricochet nails a fantastic corkscrew plancher, nailing both of the Forgotten Sons on the outside of the ring. However, this momentum is halted when Ricochet goes for a handspring manoeuvre, only to be thumped to the back by Jackson Riker from the outside as he bounces off the rope. Blake and Cutler expertly take charge of Ricochet, targeting his lower back for the next few minutes. Aleister Black eventually gets the tag, wiping out Blake and Cutler in a matter of seconds. Black connects with a springboard Meteora. Ricochet hits a twisting vertical suplex, and in one spot, one of the best spots of the match, Wesley Blake goes up to meet Ricochet, who is on the top turnbuckle, and attempts a reverse Rana from the top rope, only for Ricochet to land perfectly on his feet, to the shock and amazement of his opponent. Ricochet and Black double team Blake with a modified GTS big boot combo. Then it's the turn of Blake and Cutler to hit one of their own double team moves with a backstabber and a flying elbow combo for a close near fall and swinging the advantage back in the way of the Forgotten Sons. Aleister Black connects with a black mass on Cutler, knocking him clean out of the ring, only for Black to be nailed with a very kind of unique jackknife gutbuster from Blake. Blake goes for the cover. Black manages to put his foot on the bottom rope, but Riker knocks Black's foot from the bottom rope. This was spotted by the referee, and Jackson Riker is sent back into the back. Back in the ring, Aleister Black connects with a black mass, which was followed by a Ricochet 630, who covers and gets the 3 count to not only win the match, but the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic trophy. That was a fantastic match and a great effort from the Forgotten Sons, who pulled off some of the some very unique moves and some very unique combo double team moves that very nearly won them the match, but it wasn't to be. The match went 15 minutes as and in my opinion was one of the highlights of the whole tournament, which from top to bottom was one of the best Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classics of all time. So many spots and so many close near falls, and full credit to the heel team of the Forgotten Sons. They have gone some way to making a believer out of me with that one match alone, so really good effort from those two. Ricochet and Aleister Black stand in the ring with the Dusty Cup as the War Raiders head to the ring to kind of face their challengers to the NXT tag team titles at NXT TakeOver New York in just 7 days time, and that will be something special, especially after the special main event that we've just witnessed. That was a really fun episode of NXT as we get ever closer to TakeOver New York in just 7 days time. The lineup as it stands at the moment, I think the card is pretty much complete. We've got Shayna Baszler defending her NXT Women's Championship in a 4-way match, so she's taking on Bianca Belair, Kairi Sane and Io Shirai. Then we've got the War Raiders. Now they know who their title challengers are going to be at TakeOver New York next Friday night, and that's the winners of the Dusty Road Tag Team Classic, Ricochet and Aleister Black, who beat the Forgotten Sons in that very good final matchup just now. So it'll be Black and Ricochet versus the War Raiders for the NXT Tag Team Championships. Then we got the Velveteen Dream. He's going to be defending his NXT North American Championship against Matt Riddle. Pete Dunne, the current WWE United Kingdom champion, will be taking on probably his most fierce competitor, his most fierce opponent and challenger for his championship to date, the almighty Ring General Walter. And then in the main event, we've got Johnny Gargano and Adam Cole going in a 2 out of 3 falls match for the vacant NXT Championship. I'm going to be giving a full rundown of these matches next week and my predictions to go along with that. So that will be on the kind of go-home edition of Wrestling with Johners next week. So the schedule for podcasts over the next couple of weeks, the next episode of Wrestling Johners will be next Friday, which will be kind of the afternoon, evening of NXT TakeOver New York. So that will cover April the April the 3rd edition of NXT UK and NXT from Full Sail. But on top of that, I'll be giving you my full predictions for WrestleMania and TakeOver New York. And that will be coming out on Friday the 5th. Of course, we've got TakeOver New York on Friday the 5th, and Wrestling with Johners will be bringing out a special episode covering TakeOver New York. So a full review, a full rundown of that show from Friday night on the Saturday afternoon. So just 24 hours later, or less than 24 hours later, you'll be getting Wrestling with Johners and the NXT TakeOver New York review. Of course, you've got the Hall of Fame on the Saturday night. I won't necessarily be covering that, but WrestleMania on Sunday the 7th of April. Now, I'll be watching that live and hoping to get a full review of WrestleMania, a full rundown of all the matches, including the pre-show all the way through to the main event on Monday, and that'll be Monday the 8th of April. We're also looking to get a special edition of Wrestling with Johners out over that week, covering Ring of Honor's and New Japan's G1 Supercard from Madison Square Gardens. It does take place on Saturday the 6th of April. We won't be doing it, we won't be recording it over that weekend, but that will be an episode that we're looking to get out post WrestleMania, so sometime during the week after WrestleMania. So a lot to look forward to as far as podcasts are concerned, a lot of content to get out to you guys. There's going to be a lot of work to cover everything, but starting from next week when we cover NXT UK and NXT, and like I say, that's the go-home episode before TakeOver and WrestleMania, and my full predictions of both of them cards will be as part of that episode. We'll be doing a full review of TakeOver New York, a full review of WrestleMania, and a full review of the G1 Supercard from Madison Square Garden. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you did, please don't forget to subscribe and shout about this podcast. Tell your friends, tell your family, and keep listening to Wrestling with Johners for all of your weekly updates on NXT UK, NXT, WWE, and wrestling from all over the world. You can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Podbean, YouTube, Podcast Addict, Anchor, or wherever you get your podcasts. We are literally everywhere. If you have any questions for me, have any feedback, or simply want to get in touch with the show, you can do. You can email wrestlingwithjohners@gmail.com. You can reach out to us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @withjohners_pod. You can visit our YouTube page. Of course, the podcast is up on YouTube, but you can also see my videos from my time out in New Orleans during my WrestleMania 34 experience from last year. Just simply search Wrestling with Johners. You can follow the show on Instagram. Just go on to Instagram. So that's instagram.com/Wrestling with Johners. And of course, I encourage you to go and join our Facebook community group. Our Facebook group can be found on Facebook at Wrestling with Johners. So just search Wrestling with Johners. As I said, I'll be back in about a week's time to cover next week's episode of NXT and NXT UK, and that's going to be our go-home edition and covering everything NXT TakeOver New York and WrestleMania related in a lot more detail. So, in the meantime, thanks for listening. Have yourself a fun week, and take care, and speak to you all soon.